Today's interesting topic is what are the practical challenges both employers and contractors are facing in partial handovers. So, partial handing over has become a trend because it is looks very attractive for both the employer as well as the contractor. The employer wants to take the asset and start the revenue, and the contractor also wants to at least unload or semi unload the partial liabilities of the entire project. And that is where we see partial handovers happen very frequently in even mega projects and in mid-level projects. So, but the problem arises when the partial handover occurs. There occurs a gray zone of responsibility, risk allocation, and commercial exposure. So, this article will be seeing what are the practical challenges faced by both parties as a project. The first one is absence of clear definition of part or section in the contract. So it automatically raises the questions that what constitutes an usable section? Is mechanical completion sufficient? Should testing and commissioning be completed integratively for all the sections? Can handover occur without statutory approvals? So these are the many questions that arises when partial handover occurs. So even though the operational use begins, while the contractual completion always remains disputed. We have an interesting cases and arbitration council where you see that the toll operation has begun for a road contract, but still the contractor has not been given the provisional completion certificate. On the other hand, the contractor is also doing the maintenance obligation for the construction road without which is under operation. So this is very common not only in road constructions, even in oil and gas and power plants. Because in power plants we do many phase sections are being constructed, and this is very common in all kind of constructions. So partial handover means transfer of care, custody, and control. So care of the works, security responsibilities, insurance risk. So what are the practical problems is the contractor's manpower is still working nearby and they are still sharing the utilities and temporary facilities. Interface works continues in adjacent areas. For example, if any damage occurs, then the key dispute becomes who actually controls the asset at the time of damage. So insurance claims frequently stall at this stage. And the most important confusion is the defect liability period confusion. There will be confusion in warranty period also. So the defect notification period starts different for different sections. It is very practically difficult to track and control. If DNP differs, also the retentions also will differ, the bank guarantees will differ, maintenance team get mobilized prematurely, warranty periods expire unevenly, tracking defects across multiple handover dates is going to be very difficult. And in this case, mostly the contractors are being exploited for maintenance if maintenance is in their scope. If maintenance in the employer scope, then that's going to be confusion between the maintenance as well as the uncompleted works. Disruption to remaining works. So partial possession rarely happens in isolation. They have an impact on restricted access routes for the balance works to be completed, safety, segregation requirements, limited working hours due to operations that you should not interfere with the operation, and that will have a big revenue hit if any breakdowns or shutdown happens. Permittive working system differs inside a working plant, and it differs for a greenfield plant. And multiple permit system will be very difficult for the contractor to follow. The contractor's productivity will automatically reduce. Yet employer frequently argue that you already handed over the area, so you should not access this area and you have to use a different route. So this creates entitlement debates relating to extension of time, loss of productivity, as well as the prolongation cost. Interface risk explosion. So after partial handover, there will be operational personnel who will be an additional stakeholder coming on board, and third-party contractors are still working, and tenants or any other third contractor who is going to do the operation is going to be on the site. So damages caused by others attributes to original contractor, unauthorized modifications in the systems, overloading of the system before final commissioning, integration failures between the completed and the incomplete system. This is a very common situation, and people from technical background and project managers can understand this. This is not an easy problem. So interface management becomes exponentially complex. So testing and commissioning complications, like I said, that you might have successfully commission and test the system in isolation and hand over to the employer, and it's being running now. But when it comes to the overall handover of the project, the overall testing has to be done, and this has to be integrated. A running plant, when it's going to be integrated with the other parts of the plant, it may trigger shutdowns. Okay, so shutdown windows might not be available, and load testing is impossible due to live operations. And live operation might be at under the average load, but you want to test the system for the extreme load in integrated way. So later failures often trigger disputes on whether defects arose from construction deficiency or premature operational use. So that's a very common kind of dispute in construction. So measurement and payment disputes. Okay, partial handover has been completed. So when is the retention money is going to be released for the partial completion? And the most important thing is, what is the value or the percentage for the partial completed item is going to be disputed. So certification of sectional completion is a challenge for both employer and contractor. Valuation of the incomplete minor works is also going to be a challenge. And treatment of temporary works still in use also will be a challenge. So this will create disputes between the contractor and employer. The decision is not very easy to take. I can just say that you have to be very proactive in taking decisions, but this is going to be really tough, not easy. Sometimes we have to take a decision. The decision comes with the risk. Even the employer is taking the risk. The employer is agreeing to take some of the risks for the advantages they are getting on the operations. So liability dilutions and evidence problem. Once the employer occupies the part of the work, the contractor's control gets reduced. The construction records weaken, site control reduces, responsibility becomes shared. If the contractor is going for an arbitration or the employer is going for the arbitration, the contractor has a weaker position in terms of evidences because it is already under the control of the employer. Safety responsibility overlap. So this is safety interface is going to be always a very risky part. And mostly both employers and contractors do not compromise on it. Even though it's overlap, even though it's duplicate, both the parties ready to do that from my experience because they don't compromise on the safety. Public interactions with the construction zones, conflicting safety protocols. For example, if you are building an iris apartment, part is under construction, part is being occupied by the tenants. Tenants will be coming and moving, and they will not be aware of the construction policies, safety policies. So that's going to be really a challenge. So accidents during this phase often result in multi-party liability disputes. Contract administration failures. The biggest practical challenge is not contractual drafting, it's the administrative failures. See, what all things will often miss? Let's have a checklist. The formal taking over certificate will never happen. Defined sectional boundaries, snag list at handover, joint condition survey, operational, even though the conditional survey happens, there will not be acceptance. Operational limitations records, informal occupation without documentation becomes a future claim disaster. Now coming to the delay and liquidated damages, as already we saw that this will reduce the productivity and might result in disruption for the contractor. So in those cases, can the LD apply after beneficial use? Should sectional completion stop LD accrual? Does employer possession constitute prevention? So improper administration may unintentionally place the project into time at large situations, which should be under the control of the contract administrators from both the sides. So here are a few practical recommendations to keep these challenges under control. For contractors, record exact handover boundaries, obtain signed sectional completion certificates. Of course, it's going to be difficult. Document operational restrictions imposed post handover. Maintain interface damages log. So you might have an interface log, but maintain an interface damage log for at least it reduces the disputes in later stage. So for employers, avoid operational use before contractual readiness. Define responsibilities post possession. Align the insurance transition very clearly. For engineers or contract administrators or PMCs, issue formal takeover certificates, maintain sectional defect registers, clearly identify residual works. And that is going to be a challenge. But if you do that, at least you control or monitor the challenge. If you are not doing it, then it will increase the risk in later stage. So takeaway is partial handover appears commercially attractive, but contractually very sensitive. It represents a transition point where construction risk transforms into an operational risk. Without a disciplined contract administration, partial handover becomes the starting point of major disputes. Please keep that in mind and take wise decisions and follow the control measures we have given. And thanks for your time. Take care. Bye.